is used every single day against people, to the point where prisoners have to have limbs amputated because the handcuffs that Israelis use on them are so tight, and they beat Palestinians and don't let them go to the bathroom, so they end up defecating on themselves. Well, anyone who goes into a space like that, they should be going to The Hague. If you are doing propaganda, you should be behind a glass box, because that is not a normal space that needs to be spoken about. Many of the people in Israel's torture dungeons have never been tried. They are held under administrative detention, and young Palestinians, such as a 17-year-old from the West Bank who was never tried, recently died due to severe abuse and neglect in Israeli jails. He had so many illnesses that came from his treatment. And Murray doesn't once mention anything about the level of brutality in these Israeli torture dungeons. He actually looks at the Palestinians there and says that they are humiliated. It is really quite something. And Murray went to one of the highest security ones, where no doubt the abuse is particularly bad. And when you consider that you have more than 60 Palestinians who have been executed inside these torture dungeons, whether that is through sadistic abuse or neglect, it is a truly horrifying thing. You have cases like Dr. Adnan al-Bursh, who was never actually charged with a crime, and yet he was found beaten severely, naked from the waist down. He was murdered, and his body has never been released, and people have speculated that perhaps he was tortured to death sexually. And is this really an outrageous speculation to make when you have the case of a Palestinian who was gang raped by Israeli soldiers on camera, where he had items inserted inside of him that caused damage to the point where he needed surgery? And I think it's worth here going back to the fact that Murray claims most Israelis begrudgingly enter the Gaza Strip, that they don't celebrate the things that they do to Palestinians. Well, of course, you first of all had a riot, a January 6th style event, where Israelis attempted to break into an Israeli torture camp to get the people charged of these crimes out. But you also had Hanoch Milwitsky, a member of Netanyahu's Likud party, who in a discussion with Ahmed Tipi, a Palestinian member of the Israeli Knesset, who was asking was it legitimate to use sexual torture on Palestinians, stated, if he is a Nukhba, which is an elite member of Hamas's fighting force.
By the way, all of this is stuff that many people in this community are equipped with, like the knowledge that many people in this community are equipped with. All of this is knowledge that I'm equipped with, which is why when I make the calculation and I say things about Israel and Israeli society or what Israel has become, like this is the knowledge that I'm operating off of. It's not like, it's not out of nowhere, okay? And lying, boo-hoo, lying. And that's what it is. The only thing people can say in the face of these realities, because they are so atrocious on their own, is to claim, no, that didn't happen. Because this right here openly shows that even this person that wants to defend Israel recognizes right from wrong, okay? The reason why they have to say, oh, this is a lie, is because if it's true, then the revulsion that people feel towards Israel is valid. It's also ridiculous to say this is a lie because everything is on camera. There's CCTV footage over it. Like every single thing that Chris just mentioned was broadly covered in Israeli media and never covered in Western media. And the reason for why it was never covered in Western media or was simply mentioned as an afterthought is because if it was covered accurately in Western media, Western society would fucking fall apart, because you like living with this knowledge in your mind and seeing your politicians still offer unconditional support to this country that's doing this sort of shit is unimaginable. It undermines democracy in and of itself. Okay? It doesn't even end there. The main rapist became a television personality in the process. He unmasked himself in this final act and then became a TV personality. He was like hosting TV shows on Israeli television.
Everything is legitimate, everything. He did not deny the gang rape had occurred. In fact, he said it was legitimate. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security.
Even what he's talking about here was also on camera. The Knesset had an emergency meeting, and And the fucking dude from the Likud party actively yelled in the Knesset meeting saying that it is legitimate to do rapes to these Palestinians in the concentration camp. Like he said it. And the reality is, like, he shouldn't feel a sense of shame at all in Israeli society. Why should he feel a sense of shame in Israeli society? When you look at the broader attitudes demonstrated in Israeli society towards Palestinians, of course he's not going to fucking feel shame saying this shit.
Referred to these people as heroes. He has spoken consistently about his own pride over the horrifying conditions that he has instituted in these torture camps. Is this really congruent with Murray's idea that all Israelis wanted to do is dance, that they are the lovers of life fighting against an evil death cult? Because Murray is set on the idea that extreme actions of violence on October the 7th, some of which happened and some of which didn't happen, indict the entire Palestinian population as a death cult. But Israel, a place where systemic sexual torture and abuse is clearly government policy, well, he thinks they're the good and moral people who we should be allied with. And Murray claims that the Palestinians that he saw inside the Israeli torture camp were 100% people who committed crimes on October the 7th. They were in videos, he claims. But there weren't that many people captured on October the 7th, and these people are held in tiny cells which are very overcrowded, where they are kept blindfolded and handcuffed all day. So how could Murray actually tell who these people were? And a recent Haaretz article cast doubt into this, because not only does it note the sadistic torture inflicted at the Yemen field torture camp, where he also notes that his superiors referred to it as a cemetery because so many people were being killed in it, but he also notes that the narrative that all of the people there were Nukhba terrorists was just not true. They were torturing innocent people before they were interrogated. Murray claims that there was nothing to be learnt from these evil Nukhba terrorists, that they were not even worth looking at or speaking to. They were just pure evil. But are the people who consistently torture not only these people alleged to have committed crimes, but also people who are innocent and people who have non-violently resisted Israeli occupation, which is illegal under international law? Are their torturers not monstrously evil? I mean, there are many Israelis who have spoken about this. You could read Ari Shavitz on Gaza Beach, where he himself starts to see the comparison between what he is doing and what the Nazis did to Jewish people themselves. But Murray thinks that that's just not something that his readers need to hear or something that is worth mentioning for him, because Murray is no expert. He presents one side, and he does this with the specific goal of justifying the extermination of Palestinians. And not only does Murray choose to leave out certain parts of what is happening in Palestine so as to maintain his narrative, he sometimes just outright lies. When he discusses his visit to the Israeli torture dungeons, he has this to say. He states that conditions in Israeli jails were pretty good before October the 7th, fairly relaxed. This is just a ridiculous lie. There is no other way to put it. There is no truth to what...
Sexual violence was systematic in Israeli detention centers before October 7 as well. Plenty of reporting has been conducted on the matter.
Murray is saying there are so many articles which detail horrific abuse by Israelis of Palestinians inside their prisons long before October the 7th. You have On Gaza Beach, which is from the First Intifada, when horrific violence was used against Palestinians during that period. And you also have this article from the Sunday Times in 1977, where they talk about Israel's systemic torture of Palestinians. And this part has always horrified me. When it was realized that he had lied, Eddie repeatedly banged Abdul Karim's head against a rough wall. Pieces of plaster fell out, and Orly told him to swallow them, which he did. If I had anything, I would give it to you, Abdul Karim kept telling his interrogators. They did not believe him. He was kept under a cold shower, jammed into a barrel of freezing water, and suspended from his wrists once more, while the interrogator Orly squeezed his genitals. This is violent torture and sexual abuse detailed by the Sunday Times in 1977. To claim that Israeli jails had been relaxed prior to October the 7th is a complete and utter lie. And also, I will note something here. Douglas Murray doesn't mention Itamar Ben-Gvir's name. He just says the minister in charge of those prisons. He makes an active choice not to mention Itamar Ben-Gvir, Israel's Minister of National Security, who controls the country's police and prisons, because Murray loves to harp on about how Palestinians are religious extremists who kill for fun and believe that it is some kind of divine plan, pleasing God. And I'm sure that you could find examples of Palestinians who believe this, but one thing I can tell you is that this is completely what Itamar Ben-Gvir believes. Ben-Gvir is a disciple of Rabbi Meir Kahane, a man who tried to introduce bills to the Israeli Knesset breakdown of Douglas Murray's terrible new book, then I would highly recommend this piece in Current Affairs by Nathan J. Robinson. There's also a YouTube video of him talking about very similar things, but this breakdown is really good, and in part I will draw on it because I have not read all of Douglas Murray's book. However, I have looked through certain parts of it and checked all of the claims that Robinson is making because some of them seem utterly outrageous, and I'll go into detail about them. But there is one part which really leapt out to me, and this actually came from a Times Radio interview with Douglas Murray, where he was talking about the fact that he had visited one of Israel's maximum security torture dungeons.
You also visit an Israeli prison for captured Hamas fighters in the book. You say you spent hours there, but you don't quote anybody there. You don't paraphrase anybody there. You say, although I saw people I knew from the atrocity videos, there was nothing to learn from them. Why are Palestinian voices so absent from this book?
Now, in of itself, visiting an Israeli torture dungeon is bad enough, because in any decent society, anyone who enters into a space like that, where systemic torture, whether that is sexual, physical, or mental,